Now, in this next SEO tip, I want to introduce you to what's called the Google Webmaster Guidelines. It's easy enough to find. Just go to Google and search using the phrase Google Webmaster Guidelines. And when you do a search, there's probably some adverts at the top, but when you go to this page here, you just click on it. This is the page from the support.google.com website. And if you click on that, up come the Google Webmaster Guidelines. Now you'll see basically there's three sections. We'll have a look at these in a minute. And there's also quality guidelines here. And what this page does, it tells you what Google likes and it tells you what Google doesn't like. So the basic principle here is make pages primarily for users, not for search engines. Or in English, don't over-optimize. Don't deceive your users by trying to get them by luring them with tips and tricks and what have you. So it says, avoid tips intended to improve your search rankings. A good rule of thumb is, would you feel comfortable explaining what you've done to a Google employee sitting next to you? And that's probably a pretty good test for SEO. Imagine you had someone from Google sat next to you and you were trying to explain with a straight face what you'd done and why you'd done it. And if you've engaged in over-optimization, basically Google will look at that as something that breaks its guidelines, because it clearly says, there it is, make pages primarily for users, not for search engines. So as to say, don't over-optimize. There are some specific guidelines here, so don't use automatically generated content. Believe it or not, there are bits of software you can buy where you basically tell it what your website's about, then it will just generate garbage content. And it really is garbage content, so don't do things like that. Also, don't take part in linking schemes. If you get an email that says, hey, we'll sell you 1,000 links for $50 or something stupid, avoid those like the plague, because there are what are called link farms out there, which are basically lots and lots of websites set up by people who are selling links. And if you give them the money, they might well put a link in from their 50 or 1,000 websites or whatever it is to you. But those links are going to be useless. In fact, they'll be worse than useless, because Google will identify you as having lots of links from a link farm, and all of a sudden you're thrown out of the Google index because you've broken their terms and conditions. It also says don't create pages with little or no original content. So you don't want to steal stuff from other people, because Google is very good at looking at or finding duplicate content that you've borrowed, shall we say, from other websites. So what you want to do when you're creating pages is sit down, create good quality content and original content, brand new content that you have basically devised yourself. There's a whole bunch of other things. My favorite here is sneaky redirects. If you want to know what those are, you can click on them. Things like hidden text or links. Back in the day, I've been doing SEO for about 20 years, and back in the day, believe it or not, people would have maybe a white background at the bottom of their websites that have a whole bunch of text in white on a white background, you see what I mean? So it's kind of hidden from humans, but it was visible to the search engines, and that did work once upon a time. Nowadays, tricks like that are a good way of getting yourself banned. Doorway pages. You don't want hundreds and hundreds of doorway pages which are purely set up to try and basically get a ranking in the search engine and then redirect you back to your home page or your selling page, what happens to be. Scraped content is basically content you've borrowed from other people, should we say. So all of these things here, if you take part in affiliate programs, if it doesn't add sort of particular value to your website, that's not really going to do much good for your website. And also, make sure you don't have lots of irrelevant keywords purely to try and attract visitors. Obviously, if you have websites with what it calls malicious behavior, such as sort of malware or things like that, then obviously that's a very bad idea. And there are other things like automated queries. There is software you can buy where basically you can just put in maybe your 10 top keyword searches that you want to track for your website, and then it will search all the different versions of Google and indeed the other search engines. And Google specifically mentions a couple of companies by name that it strongly disapproves of, essentially because it's chewing up Google's bandwidth, so it doesn't like it. What it then says, these are the bad things, avoid all these things, but the good things it basically says, is monitor your website for hacking and bad content. You might think, well, how can I do that? Simple answer, sign up for something that used to be called the Google Webmaster Tools, Just to confuse everyone, it's now been renamed and it's now called the Google Search Console. So just search for that or check out my videos on that. And you'll find that there's a little section in there where you can tell whether or not your website's been hacked. And this bit here is another important one: preventing and removing user-generated spam. User-generated spam is Google speak for things like comments. So if you allow comments, say, on your WordPress website, and if you don't monitor these and the comments are just basically full of spam of one sort or another, then Google takes the view that, hey, it's your website, you're responsible for it. So if you allow a whole load of spammy comments on there, you're the person that suffers. So for what it's worth, I would say if you're using WordPress, simply disable the comments section. If you want to know how to disable comments within WordPress, for instance, there's a plugin. I think it's simply called something like Disable Comments. You just fire that up, activate it, and then the comments part of the WordPress system just disappears, basically. And if you do want comments, do make sure they're properly monitored so you don't have this user-generated spam, because as I say, if you do, you will suffer. I speak from experience here. A couple of years ago, I created a new website, and it was just kind of in development, and I just sort of left it there for a while. And I had other things to do, and when I went back to it, I couldn't believe it. There was something like 1,000 comments there, virtually all of them just loaded with spam. And ever since then, I've just, the first thing I do when I create a WordPress website is I disable comments, because there are bits of software out there that will just automatically find places where it can leave a comment, and it will basically leave a comment saying dodgy products or services. And as I say, Google strongly disapproves of that. Down here it clearly states, now this is really important, if your site violates one or more of these guidelines, then Google may take a manual action against it. A manual action is Google speak for you've just been thrown out of Google. So, that's like the worst thing that can happen. If you're lucky, that might demote you. So, if you're on page 1, you might find yourself on page 10, which is almost the same thing, because these days you have to be on page 1, really. Back in the day, people would look at page 1 of Google, and then they'd go to page 2, page 3. These days, the attention span on the internet seems to be going down and down and down. So largely, if people don't find you on the first page, they don't check out the second page. If they can't find what they want, they just do a different search until they do find what they want. So as I say, these days, you really need to try and aim to be on page 1. Now, if we go back up here, there's these 3 sections that I pointed out. Firstly, help Google find your pages, and there's a down arrow so you can get more information. Help Google understand your pages, again with a down arrow, and help visitors use your pages. So let's look at this first one here. So help Google find your pages. So what's in here? Ensure that all pages on the site can be reached by a link from another findable page. The referring link should either include text or, for images, an alt attribute that is relevant to the target page. So there's lots of useful information in there. What it's really telling you is that Google likes text. It likes text links over everything else, because Google can easily understand a text link. If you have an image with a link behind it, that's all well and good, but also make sure you use what are called alt attributes on your image. If that's confusing, go and check out one of my videos on what alt attributes are. But essentially, an alt attribute is a little bit of code behind a picture that basically tells Google what the picture is about. Now, the second section basically says provide a sitemap, which is a little bit confusing because there's 2 types of sitemaps. There's what's called an HTML sitemap and an XML sitemap. Again, I have videos explaining what these 2 terms mean if you go and check those out. But here it says provide a sitemap with links that point to the important pages of your website, and it says also provide a page which is human readable with a list of links to these pages, often called a site index or a sitemap page. So this is telling you that Google likes both types of sitemaps. An HTML sitemap. An HTML sitemap is purely just an ordinary page on your website with links to all the other pages. That's all it is. And again, if you're using WordPress, you'll find that either via your template or a plugin, you can just generate a sitemap page that will be displayed on your website. And when people display this, they will see links to all the other pages. An XML sitemap, it sounds complicated, but again, if you're using WordPress, you would just use a plugin to generate this automatically for you. But you need both of these. You need an HTML sitemap and an XML sitemap. Why? Because Google tells you to do it. The next bit, limit the number of links on the page to a reasonable number. I always wondered what a reasonable number was, and a while back they added this, a few thousand at the most. I think you would be insane to have a few thousand links on your page. I would say, more like 50 or 100 at the most. So, again, be reasonable with this. Don't have too many links on the page. Again, this one here, it says use a robots text file. Again, it sounds technical, but again, if you're using WordPress, this will just be done for you. The idea of a robots text file is humans don't see it, but the search engines do see it. And it's basically a list of areas of your website you don't want Google to crawl, private or irrelevant areas of the website. Then down here it says ways to help Google find your site. Well, if for some reason Google hasn't indexed your site, you can go to this address here, you just click on it, and you would submit your URL, and then Google would take a look at your site. I would not actually recommend this. I would say let Google find your site naturally, and any good site these days, Google will just find it by links from other sites to your website, which is the best way of doing it. This bit here says submit a sitemap using the Google Search Console. You might think, what's that about? Wasn't that covered elsewhere? Well, yes, it was. Google up here said basically create a sitemap, and down here it's saying sign up for something called the Google Search Console, which used to be called the Google Webmaster Tools, and basically just tell Google exactly what your sitemap is called and where it is, and there's a little tool there for testing it. And once you've done that, you know for sure that Google can read your sitemap page, it knows where it is, what it's called, and then it'll integrate the XML sitemap within the Google sort of indexing system, if you like. Right, this next section, it says, help Google understand your pages. So what's this about? Whoa, lots of stuff here. Create a useful, information-rich site and write pages that clearly and accurately describe your content. What that's really telling you is that if you've got a company that has maybe 20 different products or what have you, ideally on each page concentrate on talking about one product or one service. So don't try and cram everything into one page, especially not the home page. So have your pages kind of focused on a particular product or service. That's really what that's telling you. This next bit's kind of common sense. It says think about the words users would type in to find your pages and make sure your site actually includes these words within it. So for instance, in my case, if I'm doing SEO training courses in Perth, I'd want the words SEO training courses, seminars, those kind of words, I'd actually want as ordinary text within my website. Ensure that the title elements and alt attributes are descriptive, specific, and accurate. Now the title is the what's called the HTML title. That is the single most important on-site SEO factor by miles. You get that right and you're in the game. You get that wrong and basically you haven't got a chance. So your HTML title, like in my case, I do SEO training courses in Perth. So my HTML title should be something like SEO training courses Perth, something like that, something short and snappy to the point, and then maybe a little bit of extra information because you don't want your titles too short because you get penalized for that. So again, I do have a video on titles. Go and check that out. And there's something called alt attributes. Alt attributes are alt is short for alternative, and they're little bits of code you put behind the pictures and basically help Google by telling Google what the picture is about. So for instance, if I have a picture of myself in a training room in Perth, I could have an alt attribute behind the picture, if you like, that's in the code but the humans don't see, and the alt attribute could say something like David Murray delivering a training course in Perth or something like that. Design your site to have a clear conceptual page hierarchy. What that means is that if you've got a whole bunch of products, let's say you're I don't know, you've got a website about pets, for instance, you could have one section about dogs, another section about cats, another section about something else, fish maybe, and ideally sort of keep them all separate. And you can have a conceptual hierarchy and also a physical hierarchy. What I mean by that is that Once you start looking into how to design your website, it's a bit like on your hard disk. On your hard disk, you can have subdirectories or subfolders. You can have the same on your website. So, for instance, in that example about a pet shop, you could have a folder called cats, another folder called dogs, and all the relevant pages could go into those folders. It just helps Google to understand what's going on. Now, if you have things like images, videos, and what's called structured data, again, it just says follow the guidelines, and I won't do it, but you need to click on these things and read that information to get more information about what Google actually likes. This bit here, it says when using a content management system or CMS such as WordPress. I'm not a great fan of Wix. I like WordPress. With WordPress, it's a content management system that makes it very, very easy for just about anyone to create and maintain websites. But you've got to make sure it's set up properly so that all the links are easily followed by Google, and also each page has a proper name. Some of the earlier versions of WordPress by default would give file names something like, I don't know, question mark, squiggle, squiggle, or whatever, a nonsense name. So it's very important that the actual names of your individual pages, the file names of the individual pages on, say, your website server, have proper names. This bit here is basically saying, again, it sounds a little bit techy, but it's basically saying make sure Google has access to all the important parts of your website. And again, by and large, you don't have to worry about this too much now, especially if you're using something like WordPress. This bit here is just saying make sure you don't go out of your way to block the search bots or the Google bots that come and search your website. Again, you probably don't have to worry too much about that one. And this last bit is saying that if you've got lots of advertising links, make sure you use a no-follow links if the links follow through to another website. So some people actually make money by having websites that are covered in advertising. And this used to be very profitable and still is if you do it right. But ideally what you should do is have what are called rel equals no-follow links to advertising sites or affiliate sites. Again, if you're not sure what follow and no follow means, I've got a video for that. Just go and check it out. And it's a lot easier than it seems. Then lastly, we've got this section that says help visitors to use your pages. So if you click here to expand this and go and have a look, it says try to use text instead of images. So once you start clicking on all these things, all these extra bits of information, you'll understand quite soon that what Google really likes is text. So have as many text links as possible and use text rather than images to display information about your particular website. And again, it does say, well, if you do want to use images, which is fine, make sure they have alt tags behind them with a few words of descriptive text. Notice the word few. You don't want a huge, great sort of book as your alt text. You just want a few descriptive words of text. Ensure that all links go to live web pages. Google speak for don't have any broken links on your website. Again, there's lots of ways of checking for this, and I've got another little video that shows you how to do that. But if you've got one or two bad links or broken links, then you probably get away with it. But if you've got lots of broken links, Google will say, well, you've got a website, you can't be bothered maintaining it properly, why should we promote that? Because Google is looking to promote good websites, not ones that are a little bit sloppy in the way they do things. So just check on a regular basis that you haven't got any broken links. You might find that your website is fine, but obviously remember, if you've got links to external sources, you've got no control over those. So you might find that possibly the external website you've linked to has gone down or changed the address or something. So as I say, every so often just check for broken links. This one here, it says optimize your page loading times. Basically, that means that Google will reward you for having fast loading pages. So you want to optimize your site, so things like pictures. You don't want very, very large pictures of very large file sizes, because that obviously will slow down the loading. And there's lots and lots of other tricks you can use to speed up the speed of your website. You can use something like gzip, which is a compression system. And as I say, I've got videos on that as well. But the point here is I'm just sort of pointing out that the loading time of your website is important. This bit here, increasingly important. Design your website for all devices, sizes and types, including desktops, tablets and smartphones, especially phones. Again, if you're using WordPress, and in WordPress, if you're using what's called a responsive theme, it'll just take care of this for you. If you're using something other than WordPress, just make sure, physically go and check it, what it looks like on a tablet, on a phone, on a desktop, and also on a smart TV, because they have other problems these days, in terms of the size at which the picture is rendered. Now, this next section talks about having a secure website connection using something called HTTPS. Now, until fairly recently, most websites started with HTTP, and then it'll be like a colon / www and the usual address. Now, Google now recommends that you encrypt your sites using HTTPS. Again, it sounds complicated. It's something that a lot of websites don't bother doing. I don't use this on mine, but I still come up first. So certainly here in Perth, if I type in something like SEO training Perth, which is what I'm interested in, I generally come up first, second, and third. So I don't need to worry about this. But the thing about these guidelines is, if you ever find yourself slipping down the rankings, go back to these guidelines and think, right, what else can I do to make Google happy, basically? And one of the things I could do was make the site secure. Again, it sounds complicated, but all you have to do is just approach your web hosting companies and just give them a little bit of money, and they'll just do it for you. So it's one of those things that's easy to implement, just costs a small amount of money each year. And again, just something else you want to think about. Why? Because Google tells you to do it. Simple as that. And then down here it says, ensure that your pages are useful for readers with visual impairments. What that's really meaning is that you want to use the alt text sensibly, because alt text is used by Google, but it's originally developed for people with visual impairments. So the idea is that the software could read the alt text behind the pictures, and that way people could understand what the pictures are about, even if they couldn't see them. So the fact that this is specifically mentioned means that it's another reason for having good use of quality alt tags behind your pictures. And that's really the Google Webmaster Guidelines. Now, I don't want to click on every single thing here, because this video would go on for days. Well, not literally, but it would take a while. What you need to do is to go and do a search for this Google Webmaster Guidelines. Just search that into Google. And then on all these things here, you've got these little links all the way through. You need to go and check those out so you know exactly what Google is interested in. So for instance, if you don't know what a robots text file is, you could click on this, and then you can learn all about robots text files, or indeed you can watch my video about robots text files. So some of these things are easily implemented by everyone. Some of the things are a little bit more technical. But the point is, you want to try and abide by these guidelines as much as possible. So the closer your website matches all this stuff and you implement all this stuff, the more likely you're going to move up the search engines, and ideally finally get listed on the first page of the results. Incidentally, there's another nice little feature here which I didn't point out before. It says, if you believe another website is abusing Google's quality guidelines, please let us know by filling in a spam report. So sometimes people come to me and they say, well, I've done a fair bit of SEO, but there's a company or website listed in front of me, and they appear to be using all sorts of tips, all sorts of tricks and underhand SEO techniques. Well, if you do an analysis of a competitor that's in front of you, and if you're reasonably sure they are trying to game the system, they're using sneaky tricks in some ways, then what you can do is you can fill in a spam report. And I think I read recently that with these spam reports, around about 60% of them get acted on, and companies end up being banned. So obviously don't use it in a frivolous, malevolent way, but certainly if you've got a competitor website of yours, it's listed above you in the search engine results, and if they are breaking the guidelines, by all means report them, because it's one thing competing with other websites that are legitimately using SEO, but if they're cheating, then all's fair in love, war, and search engines. So do report them. The other thing, incidentally, is you need to go in here and not only read all these bits and pieces, but you need to click on all these clickable links to learn more about all these different bits of terminology and everything else. And once you've done that, you'll have a pretty good understanding of the basics of SEO. Obviously, there's a lot more to SEO than this, because if this was all it took, then everybody would be on the first page, and it's not possible. There's only 10 companies listed on the first page of Google results. So this is like the starting point, if you like. You need to make sure all of this has been implemented, and then there's a lot more tricks you can do. So again, you might want to check out my premium SEO course, which shows you a lot of the more advanced tricks, which are not difficult. They're just things that other people might necessarily have thought about in some cases. But they are all legitimate, because at the end of the day, if you try and game the system, and as you see in here, if you try and cheat Google, it's getting smarter and smarter by the day. So people that cheat with the SEO, they might have short-term results, but long-term they'll get thrown out, they'll get banned. So as I say, Google Webmaster Guidelines, look at them, read them, understand them, and implement them.